We will begin the muscular system with the temporalis. You see the shape of the completed temporalis next to the hands that are working there. It looks like a large comma or cartoon speech balloon. It is a circle with a projecting flattened carrot off of it. Now we will use rust-colored clay tubes to mark the attachment sites of the temporalis. The insertion point is the mandible. Mark it with a piece of your clay tube. The origin of the temporalis is the temporal bone, so create a circular line of clay along the temporal bone. The temporalis's action is to close the jaw. Note, we only labeled the attachment sites. We did not build the muscle itself. Now, remove the markers and slide in the temporalis muscle. If it doesn't fit, feel free to cut it down or to add to it with more clay. The tendon of the muscle, which is the carrot shape, goes under the zygomatic arch to attach to the mandible. Then press the muscle itself onto the temporal bone of the skull. Now we will mark the fiber direction using a wooden knife. You can see how all of the muscle fibers converging at the tendon make a fan shape. The temporalis can exert a very powerful closing pressure on the jaw. If you place your hand on the side of your head as you clench your teeth, you will feel this muscle contract. The sternocleidomastoid consists of two heads. You can see the head's finished shape at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Start by rolling out a fat clay tube. There are two heads because there are 2 points of origin, one on the sternum and the other on the clavicle. There is only one insertion point at the mastoid process on the temporal bone. Now take your wire loop and cut the clay at an angle at both ends to create a parallelogram shape. This will be the clavicular head. Now take your second piece of clay to create the sternal head. Use your wire loop to trim it down. It is wide at the insertion, the mastoid process, and then it tapers down to almost a wire at the origin on the sternum. Here we have the clavicular head and the sternal head. The action of the sternocleidomastoid is to flex the neck and rotate the head. Now, use your wooden knife to mark the muscle fiber directions. First on the sternal head. These lines run parallel along the length of the muscle. And then mark the fiber direction on the clavicular head. Now use an extruded clay tube to mark the attachment sites of the two heads. First, we will mark the origin at the clavicle with a clay tube, and then use a shorter clay tube to mark the origin on the sternum. Turn the mannequin model around. We will mark the temporal bone with a long clay tube as the point of insertion. Next, we will mark the mastoid process with just a pinch of clay as our second point of insertion. First, we will attach the clavicular head. Attach the angled bottom along the clavicle and use your fingers to press the clay so that it will stick to the model. Then the muscle will go up on a diagonal back along the line of the temporal bone. Now, use the wooden knife to trim off the excess and use your fingers to press the clay into the model. Turn the model around so you can attach the sternal head. The wide end will attach to the skull at the insertion point, the mastoid process, and the narrow end at the origin, which is the sternum. This is the sternal head. This sternal head will overlap the clavicular head slightly. The rectus abdominis is a long segmented muscle that flexes the vertebral column and is called the crunch muscle. It is the muscle for doing sit-ups. Take a large piece of the rust-colored clay and roll it into a cigar-sized tube. The origin is on the pubis and the insertion is on the sternum and the 5th, 6th, and 7th ribs. Next, roll out your clay tube and trim it with your wire loop so that it tapers at one end. The narrow end attaches to the point of the origin. Make the clay piece about 7.5 by 1.25 inches. Now take your finished shape and attach the wide end of the muscle along ribs 5 through 7 and the sternum to show the point of insertion. Use your other hand to attach it to the point of origin on the pubic bone of the pelvis. And then use your fingers to press the clay onto the model. With a muscle that covers a wide gap, make sure that it is firmly attached to the model so that it won't fall off. Now, take your wooden knife to mark the muscle fiber directions. You will notice that this muscle is segmented. Draw 4 equally spaced lines across the muscle to show the segments. These horizontal lines are called tendinous inscriptions. Then draw parallel lines running from the top to bottom of each segment. The number of segments an individual may have is variable, so they may have 4, like we have created, 5, or even 6 segments. Next, we will build the biceps brachii, which is a 2-headed muscle. Begin with 2 lumps of clay, each about the same size. Roll each of them out into a double-ended carrot or fusiform shape. There will be a long tendon at one end and a shorter tendon at the other end, and it will look like a tube with a swelling in the middle. The two heads are about the same size and same shape. Use your hand to roll out and shape the clay. The origin of the biceps is on the scapula of the shoulder girdle. The insertion point is on the proximal radius. The action of the biceps is to flex the elbow and supinate the forearm. The long tendons will be the points of origin on the scapula, and the short tubes will combine into one insertion point on the radius. Once you have formed your second head, place it side by side with the first and cut the tendon down to the same size. Then press the two belly muscles together at the shorter tendon side and pinch them together at the point of the muscle. Leave the top two tendons of origin separated. Now we can mark the attachment sites. One is on the coracoid process of the scapula, and the other is on the supraglenoid tubercle. Mark both sites with just a pinch of rust clay. The insertion will be on the radial tuberosity, which is also called the bicipital tuberosity. Now take your combined bicep and attach it to the model. First, attach the tendon of insertion on the radial tuberosity, so the side where the two heads of the muscle attach will be placed on the radial tuberosity. And then, at the top of the muscle, the medial or short head of the bicep attaches at the coracoid process of the scapula, and the lateral or long head lies in the intertubercular groove and attaches at the supraglenoid tubercle. Now take your wooden knife to mark off the tendons, which will be a horizontal line halfway down the arm. Below this line, you can draw parallel lines running up and down the muscle to show the muscle fibers. Above this line is the tendon, and below it is the muscle belly. Next, we will build the triceps. The triceps have three heads. The points of origin for the tricep brachii are the shoulder girdle and the humerus. The point of insertion is on the olecranon process of the ulna. triceps extends the elbow. It is the only muscle that extends the elbow. We will roll out 3 clay tubes for each of the heads. All of the heads will be in the shape of a carrot. Roll out a cigar-sized tube for the long head of the triceps. This head will be about 3 3/4 inches by 3/4 of an inch. Create a muscle belly or swelling with a tendon coming out of it. Pinch off the excess. Once you have your shape established, use your hand to flatten it slightly. This is our long head. Next, we will create our medial head, which is the deep head of the triceps. Roll out a smaller carrot and flatten it slightly. It should be about 3 inches by 5/8 of an inch. We will take the wooden knife and cut the top of it at an angle so that it will fit on the model. This is our medial head. Now the lateral head is another very simple kind of oval shape. We can roll a short tube and flatten it. And there you have the 3 heads. The medial head covers the posterior surface of the humerus and the intermuscular septa. Take an extruded clay string and mark that surface.